I remember before I was into computers, I was pretty young. I was looking into buying my first computer for myself.
Yeah.
This was like this was my I had worked a summer job in a pizzeria because I was like 13. Like this was pretty early. It's the first time I was ever looking into computer components. I was trying to talk
Here's a
to a
young
lot of my
boy.
friends about it, like my brother's friends, because they were older and more experienced with computer stuff. Because I hadn't really discovered internet computer forums yet and whatnot. And one person told me a decent rule of thumb would be for your somewhat important components. And to remember, I had like no money. For your somewhat important components, spend about $100 each.
Sure.
And I roughly followed that for my first. I ended up shifting things around because I ended up finding forums and stuff. But that was actually not a bad rule to get a working, usable gaming computer
Yep.
at that time. That's extreme. That's so nuts now. Like
Yep.
it's kind of sad.
JR6955 says, hey, despite the rising costs over the last years, Xboxes and PlayStations still cost the same. Now, that's a little misleading because NVIDIA, unlike Microsoft and Sony, doesn't get to continue to make money on you after you own the product, at least not to the same degree. I mean, I don't know what they're doing with everyone logging into GeForce Experience necessarily. There might be ways for them to monetize that data. I legitimately have no idea. I'm not accusing them of anything. I just don't know. But compared to what Microsoft and Sony are able to get in terms of residuals through game sales or, and with Microsoft so focused on Game Pass, monthly subscriptions, it just doesn't even begin to touch it. There's a reason that Sony and Microsoft are just trying to shift boxes rather than worrying about making money on them. But that was always true, right? Especially for Sony, who hasn't shaken up the business model to nearly the same degree that Microsoft has. So, yeah, what is up with that? Right?
Yeah. Jaden mentions that phones have been creeping ever upwards as well.
Oh, yeah. Remember when the OnePlus One launched? What did the OnePlus One cost? Like $200?
A lot cheaper than they are now. It's getting to the point where like it's really rough because like a lot of these phones, by the time you're a year and a half to 2 years into them, the battery is starting to feel really bad. There's probably a lot of other very noticeable issues and stuff like that, and it's rough to replace a phone that's like $1,000 or more when it only lasts like a year and a half to 2 years in a good state. Yes, you can obviously use it for longer than that.
Yeah, I think that's something I'd really like the lab to spend some time on, because there are a lot of budget phones out there. Like on the one hand, yes, phones have gotten crazy expensive. It costs like $1,400 US for a flagship now. That wasn't a thing not that long ago. You could get a flagship iPhone for $700-800 not that many years ago. When the first phone cracked that $1,000 barrier, everyone went, oh, and then they just marched right through it. I mean, Samsung has a phone for $2,000 now. Z Fold 3, right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, phones have also gotten cheaper than ever. You can get a full-on smartphone with, like a big touch screen and everything for like $100, $100 and low dollars off contract. I mean, that would have been insane too 6-7 years ago. So there's been this split. And one of the things that I would like the lab to do is figure out like which of those value phones are actually not awful so that we can have solid recommendations to give people. I mean, one of the big challenges with phones too is that unless the carriers are aggressively monetizing your data, like NVIDIA, they are in a position where the modern business world is expecting companies to have recurring revenue from their customers. I mean, look what's happened to Adobe's stock ever since they launched Creative Cloud, right? Compared to when they used to sell you a discrete perpetual license for each new version of the software. Shareholders love recurring revenue, and that's why NVIDIA is trying to build out stuff like their cloud gaming service, because that way they can continue to sell you the same GPU over and over and over and over and over again. Sure, it's at a lower price, but over and over and over and over again. So if you want to sell things that the customer ultimately actually owns, like a phone from a carrier or from a brand that doesn't benefit on the back end, like Apple does through the App Store or Google does through the Play Store, then you do kind of have to keep driving up prices, because you look at the profitability of Android phones and how much consolidation there's been in that market. It's clearly they're not making that much money, right? Like, that's the really scary thing, is how many dead bodies litter the path that we have ultimately found ourselves on. Yes, the prices have gone like this, but in spite of that, so many competitors have just died off along the way. Most recently, and speaking of like prominent ones, LG just abandoned it. They're like, forget it, we can't do this.
I think that was a pretty intense market share percentage thing, though. LG phones were such a small subsection of the market.
Absolutely, but you would think if there's enough margin in the product, they could buy some market share, get aggressive on pricing. But clearly there's not enough margin.
Traditionally, I don't know, pricing's a really interesting thing. And I think pricing for phones especially is a really interesting thing, because I think people will go into a store and they'll look at an iPhone and they'll see the pricing of the iPhone. And then they'll look at the Android phones, and the ones that aren't priced near the price of the iPhone, I think a lot of market research is not done, and they just assume they're really bad. Unless it's priced like the iPhone, it's probably garbage. I know people that have shopped that way with phones.
There's no doubt in my mind that Apple absolutely creates a perception of value in every market segment they move into. I mean, you look at the way that people looked at headphones, right? Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, outside of the audiophile community, the idea of spending $300, $400, $500 on headphones, it's crazy.
Insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
People just used whatever earbuds came with their Walkman. Like, that was the norm. You like, or with their iPod, right? Like, they just used whatever. Like, it was iconic. People were just walking around with their white $14.99 Apple earphones. That was it. Apple comes in. They go, hey, over-the-ear headphones. Well, actually, Beats changed the game really before Apple did, but Apple has taken it up another level. Apple comes in. They say, hey, look, earbuds are now worth $150 or $250 in the case of the AirPods Pros. Over-the-ear wireless earphones, they're now worth, what is it, $549 or something for the AirPods Max? I can't remember the pricing in US dollars because I'm a filthy Canadian. But the point is that Apple walks into a category, declares it now to be worth spending a ton of money for. They normalize that, and then everyone else ultimately reaps the benefit, other than consumers. Their competitors reap the benefit, which I've always found to just be a fascinating pattern, because there's no reason that someone other than Apple couldn't do this. I mean, remember back, again, this is probably back about 10 years ago, when so many laptops had gross TN panel screens, right? Just awful. IPS displays freaking existed, but it wasn't until
accepted it for laptops at that time.
They were TN and they were low resolution. It was normal to find a 1366 by 768 15-inch laptop display, and it looked atrocious. And all it took was for Apple to come in and say, Retina, create a value to high resolution displays that you can't make out, every single pixel this big. And all of a sudden everyone else goes, oh, okay, I guess it's time. I guess people will like this. Well, no, you should have known people would like it before Apple told them to like it, and you should have gone and been the trailblazer. But I say that, and then you look at a company like, who were those guys that made the first true wireless earphones? Help me out. It was a Kickstarter. We did a video about them. The Dash, Braggy the Dash. How'd that work out for them? Do they still exist? Braggy, that's a Wikipedia article for some Norse skaldic god of poetry or something. Braggy, the platform that, what is happening here? Braggy OS, outperforming the giants, full control with your beautiful OS. I have no idea what they have pivoted to, but where there would normally be a buy button, there is now a let's talk button. Whatever
that's concerning.
That means. Solutions ecosystem? What even is this? Concept, customization, manufacturing. What even? I don't even understand what they do. Okay, so they're like a consulting firm for, you know what? They probably license IP for wireless audio then. Because I'm sure they won some patents as part of creating the Dash. Man, don't you love websites where you just have no freaking idea what the company actually does?
Yep.
I just can't. I don't know what to do with it. Like, no, I'm not going to send you an email. Like, how ass backwards is that? I'm going to send you an email to find out what the heck it is that you do. But anyway, yeah, so being the first mover, hey, not necessarily a huge advantage in the rapidly moving space of consumer electronics.